Good morning, Sunil Bhai, Milind Bhai, and everyone who has tuned in this Sunday morning to listen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
To listen a potentially intriguing conversation on one of the most talked about topic these days, idea of India at 75. For the last 22 years, Baroda Book Browsers has proven to be the most coveted platform for providing intellectual feast through book reviews of, nearly 210 books have already been reviewed so far. While BBB, as is fondly called, has been serving varied interest of intellectual fraternity, a new initiative under the aegis of BBB was started at the onset of 2020, which is called the In Conversation series, and I call this as the opportunity created by pandemic, if I may say so. The series seeks to elicit from and engage everyone in informed dialogue that flows in a conversational style. The discussion involves at least two intellectuals who share their nuanced viewpoints and highlight varied facets of a chosen topic. The conversation also involves a third individual, the moderator. The topics chosen are usually elective, contemporary, and something concerning the general populace. The virtual platform, though through which this discussion is being moderated, has been maintained by Shambhavi from my office. A big shout out to you, Shambhavi, for your untiring support and commitment that you have been showing towards this initiative. This web platform provides an excellent opportunity for participative deliberations during the pandemic. Also, just like in any other sessions, please feel free to share your comments and questions in the chat box. Unlike book reviews, here at an appropriate time during the conversation, I will read out some of these comments and even direct some of your questions to the panel members. Friends, the idea of India at 75 envisions how India should be in its 75th year of independence. Our country is on the cusp of a dramatic social and economic transformation. It has progressed through these 74 years by managing complex pluralities and the kind of legacies that we got, poverty, external dependencies, so on and so forth. By and large, India has maintained, though through various phases, its democratic character and strengthened its tenets of liberty. India's uniqueness lies in its web of independent institutions, a secular constitution, as well as thriving activism of citizens, judiciary and media. This web has ensured the surfacing of a multitude of perspectives on every subject concerning India. And I think that's from argumentative Indian to the current scenario in the media. I mean, the books and media everywhere we see the participative Indians. Today, we are going to debate India's past achievements, its current successes and struggles. Remember, we are also going to talk about successes and struggles, and its future reflected in many ways, like aspirational youth, $5 trillion economy, so on and so forth. Today's debate will focus only on 5 assets as of now, which are economy, freedom, nationalism, foreign relations, and culture. Once again, I repeat, economy, freedom, nationalism, foreign relations, and culture. Friends, to debate on these 5 dimensions, we have amidst us an illustrious duo. I don't think they need any introduction. Join with me in welcoming Sunil Bhai, founder of Baroda Book Browsers, and Milind Bhai. Working in the same field, both of them are chartered accountants. They are not just high caliber professionals, but are also known and respected for their fearless and independent views. Furthermore, many of us might be aware that these gentlemen have a different take on the idea of India and what is currently happening here. Hence, the cross-pollination caused by their ideas will surely provide a symbiotic plateau for all of us. To cover some part of the logistics, we have 2 rounds. First round, both members will have 8 minutes each to enumerate on some 2-3 major positive developments in India post-independence, because we are talking of 75 years, along with 2 to 3 major challenges or concerns that confront India in the present circumstances. In the second round, we will have questions and discussions. So remember, first 8 minutes, first Sunil Bhai, then Milind Bhai, and then question answers. I will also be asking certain questions, and I'll be taking certain questions from the chat box. So as Sunil Bhai shares his views, as Milind Bhai shares his views, friends, feel free to write your questions if at all you have something to raise. May I now request Sunil Bhai to share his perspective on the idea of India at 75. Sunil Bhai, over to you.
Thank you, Samir, for that wonderful set off. And I would also personally like to thank, on behalf of BBB, to both you and Sambhavi for providing us such a wonderful support that has helped us to continue with the activities and programs of BBB, not only of the books review, but as an add-on to that, some 5 in conversation series programs we could do it, thanks to the virtual platform that you have been providing and all the logistic supports that seamlessly. Yeah, thank you, thank you so much. And on behalf of the BBB, let me put this on record and let me get this. Today is an equinox day, 21st March. Equinox is a phenomenon wherein both in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, because of the position of the planet Earth in terms of distance to the sun, its equatorial eclipses is equidistant. And therefore the day and night are equal. But as Samir has already hinted about, the current idea of India, though I am sure both Milind and I are equally nationalist, patriotic, so also Samir. Our view on current happenings of India may not be very convergent, maybe divergent. And to that extent, it may not be equinoxial, in terms of, its impact on the audience and people at large, because I know where the popular support and popular feeling lies. So with that initial remark, let me now delve into what I mean by the idea of India. Actually, let me delve into a bit of history to set its context. For the emergence of India as an independent nation, well, there is no gainsaying the fact that contiguous territories and regions to the southeast of Hindu Kush mountain range, and later on as it goes along on the eastern side, known as Himalayan mountain range, in the Gangetic plains and down south to the Deccan Plateau, and before that peninsula merges into Indian Ocean, the great swaths of landmass has been among the most ancient and great civilizations on this earth. And that is the background of India as a nation that we know now. I'm sure a lot of people must be knowing that Angus Maddison, the great economic historian, when he chronicled the development of economies and contribution of regions to the economies in the world in AD 1 to 1820 or right up to 2000 years, he has gone on record to suggest that China and India, like their size of population, were the major contributors to the economy of the world. So that is for the history of India. But I think if you look at one aspect throughout this civilizational period, and if I may talk about the last 800 years, where we saw 2 major empires or 2 major blocks of ruling regimes, namely the Mughal empires, and then later on for nearly 200 plus years, the British Empire. These large swaths of land, contiguous territories and regions were full of some 520 plus small medium size, and some large size fiefdoms, subedars, kingdoms, and so on and so forth. Of course, during British paramountcy, most of these kingdoms and fiefdoms were under the paramountcy of Britain and all those things, but they all have had their own style of governance. Their command, their rules, regulations were unique to the local culture, traditions, belief, religion. Now, the most striking aspect today, and from time immemorial, as far as India is concerned, that it is the most diversified, most variegated, and most dichotomy prone society or assemblage of people in a contiguous territory ever to have existed on earth, and it exists to this date. Now, if you look at in this context, this existential reality, that so much of diversity, so much of variety, and the idea of nation state, which is relatively a current and Western concept to have emerged in last 150 years, what is a nation state? A nation state is a basis under which a political entity seeks to conjoin its political legitimacy along with the cultural entity of a region which is contiguous and which is joined by the geography. Remember, the most important thing is that all the nation states that you find on this earth today, 180 countries, nowhere whatever the political entity, whether it is democracy or dictatorship or autocracy or monarchy or whatever it is, or dynasty, the cultural entities which have sought to be governed or ruled have been more or less homogeneous by language or race or religion, at least not as diverse as the India as a nation state that has been existing. So I think this is the most fundamental existential reality we have to bear in mind whenever we talk, think about the idea of this is an existential necessity. And let me tell you, at the time of independence and for good many years after that, most of the social philosophers and anthropologists were always very, very skeptical that whether India will continue to survive as an independent nation. And that doubt still persists in the minds of certain scholars. But I think we should be very, very thankful that at the time of independence, the founding fathers like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, and not to forget Baba Saheb Ambedkar, they were so farsighted, they were so sagacious, and they were full of wisdom and sage that they factored in this oddity and came out with certain preambles and certain charter document called Constitution of India. And I can challenge anyone, given the kind of structure that Indian society we have, I don't think we could have expected a better constitution. And in its preamble, everything has been incorporated to ensure that every person, every religion believer, every faith holder, every caste creed individual will have an equal sense of belonging in the state of India. And that's the basis. And that's how, the idea of India, I would like to, always have in my mind. And it will be the central premise on which, in the subsequent proceedings during question answer sessions, as well as, to speak on certain aspects about India, this will be the common thread. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunil Bhai. As expected, you have laid out a very, very good context context from where your views are emerging. And during the day, during this conversation, we'll have, I'm sure, very interesting perspectives on all the 5 dimensions that we are going to discuss. Over to you, Milind bhai, your 8 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Samir. Thanks for setting up the platform. And I completely agree that I think the views could be very divergent. So I think I am looking at this whole thing in a very different perspective. And the perspective is like this, that when we are saying India at 75, I think we are completely undermining India as a concept. Because the idea of India is not 75 years old. It is 4,500 years old, at least. And when we are talking about more than 4,500 years old, why are we giving too much of importance to 200 years of rule of British and compare everything and start recording everything which India does from that time? I think this is something which is very important for us to keep it in mind. Let's not, yes, in 4,600 years history, what is 200 years? It's not even probably 5% of the total period, right? And if that is what we are talking about, why are we so much concerned in respect of giving importance? And therefore 1947 is the freedom that we got. And that's the reason why it is important for us to keep it in mind from that angle. So it's not the idea of India, which has emerged 75 years ago. We started rebuilding India's. And probably in that, we need to address this situation, and probably I would look at it. And whenever you subject something along with the number of years that we talk about, I would look at the whole thing in 3 perspectives. That what did we do in 75 years? Where do we stand today? And where are we headed to? I think this is what is important. When you take a stock today, we need to look back. We need to look where we stand today, and we need to see where are we heading towards. Is the direction right? Was the pace right? Are we at the right position? And therefore, some of the fundamental questions that I would ask whenever the question of idea of India at 75 comes, it's important to keep it in mind. And rather than being purely idealistic in respect of what we India is, I would ask few questions. Are we at the rightful place today? Considering that we had a history of 4,500 years, we got the freedom at 75 years ago, and we got the self-rule, as we call it. You know, we became a republic, democratic. Are we at the right place? Did we do the progress that we are proud of? And are we at the right place? Second question. Is there a platform available today which is going to take us, and are we going to leapfrog from here? I think that's the second question which I would ask. Where I say that 75 years, why do we take stock? We say, are there any structural problems? Are there anything which is there today where it would come in our way when it comes to leapfrogging from here and make the nation as a completely different nation coming in times to come? The third is, are we talking about aspirational India? Are our aspirations have grown over a period of time, or aspirations have grown down over a period of time? Are we into a despondency, or are we becoming a country which is a large population of India is aspirational? I think that is what, because it is not the politicians, not the persons, not the businessmen who are going to do that. It's the aspiration of people which build a nation. And the question that we need to ask is, are we aspirational? Have we continued to remain aspirational? The third thing is that how do in these 75 years, what India was looked down or was looked upon at the time when British left, and especially when we are looking from a 75-year angle, is the world looking at us today in the same way as they were looking at us 75 years ago? Is the thing changing? Are Indians, when they step on the foreign food, or when, honestly speaking, do just in a crudest manner, when I go into a taxi, when I go to Europe and open the taxi door, and when that fellow knows that I am from India, what is going to be the thought which is going to become? Is he going to like me? Is he not going to like me? Is he going to feel that he's coming from a nation that people are proud of? And that's what is the important thing, which I would look at it as an idea of India coming from that angle, right? And that is the reason why when we talk about it, we need to see and we need to evaluate. When we talk about where we are today, it is incorrect to interpret today's position unless we see what are the important landmarks which happened in the past. Just to do a comparison. See, a very quick, very immediate comparable period is the end of World War II in 1945. There were certain countries which were completely destroyed during that period of time. And just to give you an example of Japan. Japan got completely destroyed at that point in time. And look at 1945 Japan, 1947 India. Where today Japan is, where today India is. I think that's the comparison which I would make, the only comparable, real comparison which can happen. Are we as patriotic or are we as nationalist when it comes to Japan or India? Did we miss out a point somewhere? Did we invest so much in our nation as possibly Japan invested during the period of 45 to 2021 or 22 that we are talking about? And that's what is very important for us to keep it in mind. These are the thoughts, which is important when we do an evaluation in respect of these parts. Let me point out that there are some few things which are important that we need to evaluate. And no debate in respect of idea of India today should ignore these very fundamental events which happened during those 75 years. And these events are the first and the foremost thing which I would say, and we cannot ignore. And ignoring those events have led to some of the situations today. The first and the foremost is the partition that happened. And we cannot ignore that the partition did take place on the religious ground. There was a religious nation which went out, and we chose to be a secular country. And it is too idealistic for some people to think that it did not inflict any wound on any community at all. It did inflict. The question is, did we do sufficient things? And this was repeated by way of 3 wars which happened, and then there were repeated aspects. There was a Kashmir issue. All these things were there. Now, do you think that we did the necessary thing which is required for ensuring that the people of a certain community are appropriately dealt with in respect of that? Or we just ignored it? Or we actually used some of the community as a political tool? Different times people have used this as the time. I think this is very important, and this is coming in the way of idea of India today. And I'm saying in different proportion, different people have used this as a tool rather than an instrument for building nation. It was more used as an instrument to build a political party to get the political fight. So that's the first important thing which is important that we need to keep it in mind. Second thing which I feel is very structural thing which has come in the way of India, or which is important that we need to address. We started with a mixed economy. The increased role of the state in the building of the nation. I would not say that it was a wrong decision at that point in time. But did we overstretch that? Did we continue with that model for a longer period than we should have? And if you see that there are 3 models that I see up to 91 and after 91. We were a closed economy, we were a protected economy, and that's the period during right from 1947 till 1991. And what did 1991 Manmohan Singh say? Manmohan Singh said that I did nothing but what Jagdish Bhagwati and his wife published in 1970. I've just implemented that.
Last 1 minute.
So were we late by about 20 minutes? And because of this, what happened that instead of having the British Raj going out, and we got into a license Raj. This put deep items or deep issues in respect of corruption, because the power. We gave enormous power in the hands of the politicians. And that continued. In fact, without the politicians, we cannot survive at all in this country. I think this is what happened during that period of time, and we cannot ignore that. I think what is required to be done, and I will just quickly summarize what, and there are something like bank nationalizations. We are talking about the lack of infrastructure in the social infrastructure. We invested into a very high amount of education sector, but we forgot the lower end of education.
So, Milind, and
Just
sorry, I will have to, yeah, last.
Half minute.
Yeah.
So the question here is that, are we working for the purpose of changing those issues which were there in the past? Are we doing this? And if these issues are changed, are we facing a resistance today? Or should we resist this part? And that is what is very important, that we need to keep it in mind. So my idea of India is an aspirational India. I'm an incorrigible optimist. And I feel that we are at a perfect platform for the purpose of growing forward. That's what is the view which I would.
Brilliant. So thanks, Milind bhai and Sunil bhai. When one is deriving his optimism from future aspirations, another one is deriving his optimism from glorious past. I think that's the beauty of the panel formation. That yes, both your views that has come out so far have already set the forum here with some very interesting perspective. The first one that we are going to address here is about the economy. Although I think we can discuss what Sunil bhai said and Milind bhai said in great detail, and I will keep bringing some of those points which you people made in your initial comments. But when we look at the economic perspective, and while you did make certain points, Milind bhai, we cannot discount the fact that India has moved up in the value chain from that classical Hindu rate of growth, which you also said 91 before, post 91. At the same time, we also cannot discount the question that the kind of legacy of complex land and labor laws, Sunil bhai, that we are facing, or suboptimal productivity standards that we are facing, or dynamic sector-wide economic demands that keep coming in front of us every now and then. How do you both think Indian economy is poised today, both from the point of view of the current setup and from the point of view of future expectations? I would first open that, Sunil bhai, and then Milind bhai.
Yeah, thank you, Samir. If you look at the kind of society, the kind of economic structure that was inherited and came as a legacy from independence times, there were humongous challenges in terms of to talk about the economy itself. I mean, the largest pool of poverty-stricken population was India, and it in fact continued right up to 1980. Secondly, the resources and the infrastructure, both social and economic, was so abysmal. And as Milind pointed out, the post-partition Holocaust of the millions of people's death and its wounds and scars remained for next 10-15 years. And if you look at the priorities that were required to be given, the priority was basically the subsistence level existence providing to hundreds of millions of people. So at that time, the central planned economy, the emphasis was on building some large dams and irrigation system to provide impetus to the agriculture, and also building higher institute of learning. Jawaharlal Nehru, being a very modern thinking and modern outlook person, he felt that the Indian people have caliber, but they need their own higher learning institutions so that centers of excellence can. And one can give countless examples of that. Now, you have asked specifically about the land laws and labor laws.
Yeah, so it's just to clarify, I'm not saying that we debate land laws and labor laws. I'm just saying that there's a context in which how we are poised today as far as economy is concerned.
Yeah, that is one of the structural issues with the changing environment and changing phase of the contributors to the economy from the agrarian economy to industrial an organized industry contributing economy to now service sector. So the demands of the subsets of the structural aspects or components, one of them which you said, the land laws and labor laws will definitely be important. Now let me tell you a very important statistic. 1996 until 1996, organized sector manufacturing was, after agriculture, was the largest contributor to the employment in India. Somewhere down the line after 1996, and also partly because of the rigid labor laws and inflexibility and automation that came into being in a huge way since 1990s, the ability of the organized manufacturing sector to absorb more and more people who were coming into the mainstream working age group between 50 and 60 kept on declining. Now, this is a phenomenon that is setting in India. In the meantime, the service sector has made very impressive growth after 2000, after liberalization and all those things. Now, there is one very peculiar phenomenon we must all bear in mind. If you look at the last 50 years progress of countries from low income group to middle income group and then rich country status, all of them have become less labor oriented or more service sector contributing economies after crossing the threshold of $2,000 per capita income. That's the threshold for a middle income group country. India is the only country wherein the service sector as a major contributor to the economy has started before reaching that particular level of $2,000, which we have just now reached. Now, this is something, a very unique phenomenon that has happened in India. So in that context, the economy, the way it is evolving, it will have its own challenges and all that. I have a lot of things to talk about economy, but at this stage, specific to your question on this particular aspect, I will stop at that, and I will take up other aspects like how we moved out of Hindu rate of growth and things like that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Sunil. Milind bhai.
So I think there is no denial of the fact that there are significant structural issues which are required to be addressed. And the question is, are we ready to take up those structural changes? Any change that you try to make, it is met with a tremendous amount of resistance, starting with demonetization, very dear to me and very dear to Sunil bhai, exactly on the opposite side. But,
yeah, exactly.
So exactly on the opposite side, but very dear to me. And I personally feel that if you look at it from that angle, corruption, black money, the aspects of farm laws. Now let's look at it as a simple situation. How do we use any Swaminathan committee came up with an important aspect of a green revolution. And what did we do? Green revolution, therefore, encouraging people to use fertilizers as one of the aspects of it, right? We invested in fertilizers. We introduced huge amount of subsidies, and subsidy became a political tool. We did not see if fertilizers were required for the purpose of increasing the revenue, it should have been phased out very quickly after people started using it. But we used it as a
Hello.
Milind bhai, vachche tamaru એ થઈ ગયું. Okay. Last few seconds. Yeah. So you said that it is subsidy is used as a tool.
So right? Subsidy was what was the reason why fertilizers were used? If you put in 100 rupees of fertilizer, it should give a produce which is more than 100 rupees. That's the benefit. Then only you use fertilizer. Otherwise, what's the use of using fertilizers? And for encouraging people, it was subsidized originally, but then we made it as a political tool. And it was institutionalized for an n number of years. Reservation. Water reservation was very essential. But we should have very quickly moved from the caste-based religion to the economic criteria-based religion reservation. We did not do it because we made it as a political tool. I think these are required to be changed fundamentally. And how can it be changed? We will have to come up with a big bang things where people are shaken up. And unless you shake people away, And I can tell you, as a person who is a tax professional, I can tell you, and I used to tell very frankly, and I told Mr. Narendra Modi when I met him before he became the Prime Minister, I said, sir, do you know that what happens? When I meet, say, for example, 10 businessmen are sitting, and one businessman says that I pay so much of income tax, all other persons would say that you are a fool. Now, that was the mindset. Paying tax was considered to be foolishness. I can guarantee you today that there are now quite a large number of people who take pride in saying that I pay more tax. It is no longer considered. And that's the change which demonetization type steps. I'm not saying demonetization, but this entire process for the purpose of bringing pride in complying with the laws is coming up. And that is what is required to be brought into this country. That I am a compliant citizen, and that itself is a matter of pride and not a matter of foolishness. Earlier, Reliance not paying tax was considered to be a hero. I don't think so that anyone who does not pay the tax, though legitimately required to pay tax, considered to be hero. I think that is what is important. What we need to do, and there are structural problems everywhere. And I personally feel that a huge amount of efforts have been done. And I would be very brash in saying huge amount of things have been done in last 10 years or whatever may be the number of years which Narendra Modi led. And I am very clearly, and that's the reason why, maybe errors, huge errors. I'm not saying that there are no errors. Who does not commit error? I commit error, you commit error. He has committed errors, and I can tell you that. But the question is that unless this is done, we will not change the course of action that we are doing. And that is what is required in this country. And that is what is being done.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know Sunil wants to respond to this. Sunil wants to respond to this, and I'll invite you on that. And just to, Praveerji, when you wrote on a chat box, a very important part, are we developing good citizens who are disciplined, uncorrupt followers, law of the land? I think some part already Milind Bhai touched upon when he said that paying tax was a foolishness, and now large number of people are taking pride in paying tax. Sunil Bhai has a very strong view on the economy handling of last 8 years. I am aware about that. Okay. Yeah. And since I want to talk about the current and the future perspective, I will invite Sunil Bhai, before moving on to the next dimension, I'll invite Sunil Bhai to share his views and also remain focused on the current last 8 years and your views on economy of 8 years.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to take on from few points that Milind made very spiritedly. Let me first come to the food subsidy or the farm subsidy. Now, if you look at it, after independence, the way in which the farm sector was neglected and the way in which agrarian practices were following, the outcome was, of course, partly we can blame it to the British rulers or those respective kings and monarchs and all those things. But the reality was that we were terribly deficient in food, and this deficiency in food persisted, at least as far as I can say, till I was in the college years, right up to the early 1970s. The 3 wars with Pakistan and China did very little. In fact, it accentuated, the problem. But yes, as Milind said, Swaminathan committee and number of other experts like Y.K. Alag, and they contributed very positively. And it was not just the fertilizer, but high yield giving seeds and certain agriculture practices and education that brought the green revolution. And the situation was that we were dependent on, the PL40 and import and, that kind of, the handouts from foreign countries like USA, something like ship to mouth. We became self-sufficient by the time, it was late 70s or something. After all, we continue to be self-sufficient. And now in last 15, 20 years, we can say that, in many areas of food grains, we are surplus. But most important thing, before I give a rejoinder to Milind, and he must bear this in mind. If you look at the last 40 years, the terms of trade, let me wear a bit of an economics hat here, although I'm basically like Milind, an accountant. So time and again, we'll have that fascination for figures to quote. But wearing an economist hat or a social economist hat, the terms of trade of farm sector have been the worst in India. If you look at last 40 years, consumer price index or even wholesale price index, the rate at which the prices have increased along with the income levels of people increasing, the food grain prices, save and except oilseeds and the cereals, I'm not talking about that, have been the least at the bottom of the pie. So the need for providing subsidy to farmers persists. It persisted during Indira Gandhi's time. It persisted in UPA 1. It persisted in NDA 1. And it persists till day. I can give the figures that even today, there are a lot of holdings and a lot of jingles coming on the radio as to how much money has been given by way of subsidy to farmers and poor people. So that is continuing till day. It's not that it has gone away. That is, a very important aspect. That is also an existential reality that we have to bear in mind. So this is, as far as the farmer. Now talking about the last 8 years.
Yeah, last 8 years economy. Yeah.
And since Milind has already broached the demonetization, let me tell you, my rebuttal is only one line. And I can argue for minutes and hours on this separately, if not necessary on this platform. If you use a sledgehammer and you require to crack a nut, you don't end up cracking a nut. You end up crushing a nut. And that is what exactly has happened since the demonetization was done in 2016, November. And I can give 3 vital statistics. The number of people employed in India is 405 million, which is constant since 2014. And Minister of Labor Office statistics, which were released in 2018-19. After that, they have not been released. I'm relying on CMIE data, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. That figure has remained constant. The fact is that, every year, because of the demographic dividend that we talk about, the number of people who come in the mainstream of the society ready to undertake economically gainful activity is as high as 15 million per year, whereas the number has remained steady. So that is the effect that demonetization, because it has crushed medium and small sectors and other things. And that is what we are feeling the effect. In fact, another avowed object of raising the tax revenues, I can give the figures of last 4 years. The tax buoyancy, rate, tax buoyancy. No, let me finish this. Tax buoyancy quotient, which is one of the indicators of efficiency with which the tax is collected, and demonetization was supposed to be a game changer. The tax buoyancy ratio has deteriorated in 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, so much so that in 19-20, in fact, there is a decline in the tax revenue collection of the government for the first time in 45 years. So much for just...
No, Sunil, you are quite right in terms of raising issue about employment. I'm not sure, and because we have to move to the next dimension, but the last part, Milind bhai, would you like to give your response on demonetization versus employment, which he has beautifully connected, supported with a lot of statistics?
So I think the concept which Maulik did tell me yesterday when we were talking, right, zonerism. And that is, using the correct facts for misleading people. I don't know. This was a concept which was introduced to me. And I must thank Maulik for that. See, the question here is that the data, if you look at the way in which things are developing, where does the Zomato delivery boy counted in employment? When is an Uber driver connected to the employment? The entire employment scenario is changing. And if the employment scenario is changing, and if you continue to use the old methods for collecting who pays PF, who pays the gratuity, who is under the employment, etc., I think we are relying on wrong data for the purpose of coming to this. We do not have riots on the road. We do not have people who are begging more. I have not seen the number of beggars increasing. In fact, if at all I've seen people on the street selling things and not begging things. I think that is the change which is happening here in India. And I think we need to recognize that. I personally feel that yes, there was a blip happened on account of this, and it happened and it did affect the unorganized sector. But unorganized sector, by generating employment, but destroying the economy significantly on account of non-payment of tax, the creation of absolutely unaccounted money, and then money was going into the areas that you would not want to do. There was a need for a course correction. Even if there is a cost which is attached to course correction, there was a need. And that's what I believe to be. And that's where I would end. And I think now you can move to the new topic, or you want to support
because I know, Sunil, you want to challenge that. But since we have just 30 seconds.
Let me give a rebuttal on the facts.
Yeah, but there's 30 seconds, Sunil.
Yeah, 30. Out of it, 10 seconds you already consumed.
Sorry.
So, so the point at issue is, if anybody is challenging that the figures of 405 million people gainfully employed has not changed and remained constant from 2014 and 15, if it is a distortion of figures, then I would only, entitle him to a particular perception. That's fine. Somebody is entitled to that perception, but it's a fact and the tax revenue actually has fallen in 1920 in pre-pandemic period. And that's a fact, that nominal and tax buoyancy. So that facts and figures are not distorted, and nor they are selective.
I think Sunil, that probably just to be fair on the statement was not about distortion of facts, but the statement was that the facts of 405 million employment from the base of PF and ESI may not be the only employment. And there
No, it is not PF and ESI. 405 is the gross. PF and ESI enrolled employees are far less. 405 is the total number of people.
Correct. The point, that's what I was just saying, that Milind Bhai was raising of that issue, that some of this.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So on the tax buoyancy, I think it's my topic. Just a second. I think we completely, and that is where I call zonerism there. There was a 33% reduction in the tax rate with backdating effect. And if you ignore that and say that tax buoyancy has gone down, it's the wrong statistics completely. If there was a 33% reduction in the tax rates in the corporate tax, and there is a 10% fall in the revenues, I think there is a tax buoyancy which I would consider. But let's rest this year. And I would 33% reduction from 34%, you go to 25% tax rate, and that too from a retrospective effect. I think that has never happened in this.
But I think the good takeaway from both your views, I think for individuals and not just me, but for entire audience, is that India's economic statistics are very, very interesting, and the multiple institutions and the platforms from where those data get generated, and therefore, if I may add my own views on not economy part, but how India is messing up on the data, is when one such attempt was made to link everything with other, that was that had to be dropped under the bogey of privacy of my data, and that's where Supreme Court intervened. I think that's where probably India needs far more structural reforms for data, so that all of us talk based on single data. Moving forward, there is another interesting dimension about freedom. And these days, it is the most talked about subject, not only in India, outside India also. Democracy, liberty, secularism, they are at the core of India. Excluding the emergency, never before is the time where Indian democracy is being discussed so much in international forums. What do you think? And there is somebody who has also asked in the chat box as to what people in general should do. What is, I think Bimal Bhatt asked that, what is the responsibility of people? So how can people in general, as well as government of India, do their part to promote our core value of freedom, to strengthen our core value of freedom. I know you can have your own stand about need for preserving the current ways of managing freedom, securing freedom, or you have an alternatives that you suggest that today these things are not in the spirit of freedom. And feel free, Milind bhai, your first chance.
Yeah, so it is the report which have come on that India is partly free, right? That's what has been something which has affected me. I have never felt it myself, right? And I have not seen and talked to many persons who feel that they have not felt it like this. See, we always say, and I always ask people, when I ask a businessman, economy is not doing well, I ask him, are you doing well? He said, I'm doing well, but others are not doing well. I said, tell me the name of the person who is not doing well. It's the information they get and possibly right. But I think most of the people are. So second question is, we have been successfully running the democratically elected, smooth transition of power, which happens in India from a year-to-year basis, very fair election. And we have seen stories and stories. It is the world which does not want to believe that India can be so democratically electing its people, right? Just because one single party gets a very large majority, it does not take away this. Second thing, what are the grounds on which are we losing points, right? In this, we are losing grounds because we are prohibiting the use of internet, right? And what are you comparing with? You are comparing with some 10 years ago, where internet was used by a chosen few people, where there was nothing like a Twitter, there was nothing like Facebook, there was nothing like this. And then thereafter, it became a practice for the purpose of using these platforms for the purpose of either the spreading hatred, spreading violence, spreading whatever information that you need to do, and unverified information was done, which led, and you must appreciate the fact, it led to the killing of the journalists at some place. Right? In France, we have Charlie Hebdo. Right? The magazine was attacked. Now, do you not need to control? The question here is now what happens? And I'll give you an example, very interesting example. I set up an extremely large pond of water. And I go from door to door in the village to tell, please send your kettle to drink water from my. And then someone comes and poisons that. And I as a water body owner, I said, look, I have given you the facility. It's not my job to control water. Is it what is expected to be done? If you are running a platform, it is your duty to see that it is controlled. And what the government is telling these people, please control. And that's what is important. And that's where we are losing marks. Now, if I personally feel that in a country like ours, which is so sensitive, which is so diverse, if people try to spread hatred or misinformation and use that platform for the purpose of violence, I personally feel it is not only the right of the government, but actually the duty of the government to see that these are controlled. Don't compare us with 1994 or compare with us in 2010 or 2000, where the use of internet was very limited. Right?
Thank you, Milind bhai. You have raised three very important points. One, that democratically elected government that has run this country since the time 1947.
Except 75, except those 2 years in between. Don't forget those 2 years. We conveniently forget those 2 years. The only time where democracy was ever attacked in India, ever, was 75.
Right. But I'm just not spending too much time on those 2 years because it is 35 years back. So that's the reason that we are talking of more contemporary things. But you also raised an important perspective about social media platform, which is in a way influencing perception about freedom, and not just various other apparatus which is there in the country. And Sunil bhai, this angle from freedom that Milind bhai has raised about influence of social media platforms, and therefore who is heading those social media platforms, his personal belief in ideologies could also impact freedom. That's what I'm gathering from Milind bhai's views. Do you agree on that, or you have your different views?
No, allow me to
please.
Allow me to talk about the constriction of freedom and the individual liberty which is at stake in current times. So rather than doing the circumlocution and, coming to a particular point. Very skillfully, the reference to two of the latest international agencies report, Freedom House, and the latest one, Variety of Democracy from Sweden. Yeah. Their conclusions are very, very clear. One says that, first time in last 45 years, since 1990, this is the first time that Freedom House has downgraded India from being a free democracy to partly free democracy. And they have given very elaborate reasons, and they have also portrayed the methodology that they have used, and there can be nobody can challenge that methodology, and nobody has come out with that rebuttal. In fact, the government's rebuttal to these reports is that very feeble and very, very emancipated, in the saying that the law and order is a state subject wherever the instances of the human rights abuses have been pointed out. Anyway, be that as it may, Variety of Democracy says, when we are talking that this is the only thing on which probably the entire IT cell as well as the people who are aficionados are talking, and that is that we are an electoral democracy and we have elected a democracy. Right. That's why VDAM is very, very careful, and they have used a very appropriate phrase. They say that India is now slipping into electoral autocracy. I think this is a very, very telling, and that is a very, very pertinent title, when they have given that. Okay? We can give hundreds of examples. Social media, yes. Let me also tell you that recently it has been recorded the stoppage of internet facility in Kashmir after August 2019 for a continuous period of 14 months is the largest instance of any region being deprived of internet connectivity in modern times, excluding North Korea. Now, this is a very little known fact, but this is a fact that, is something which is, if we do not get this kind of fact circulated in our own social media or our main body media, that's a different thing. But international community will take cognizance of this. So that is an important. If a lady like 21-year-old Disha Ravi can be nabbed from her home in Bangalore, a 21-year-old girl, for editing a toolkit which has nothing to do with sedition, and it can be brought to Delhi, and at whose behest it is happening. So do you think that international agencies will not take cognizance of that? Or should I go to a businessman and ask him whether your business has more prospered or not? Yes, Samir, you and I, and Milind, you and I and Samir, we are very privileged section of the society, and we are not getting affected by the constriction in the freedom or liberty. You both guys are of course much more famous and much more relevant than me. I am not that relevant to a person. So I know that the moment I become more relevant, the moment I become more influence maker in the society, I know what kind of difficulties I will be facing in current day. That is what sums up.
In fact, Sunil bhai, very good point. Electoral autocracy is really a very powerful observation that you have made. Tailab Shah wrote on a chat among many things.
Not my observation. That is what the report says.
I mean the observation, but you identified that as a very significant observation about Indian Freedom Index, and I think that's a good point. Tailab Shah made a very interesting statement. He said, "Yatha praja tatha raja." It is not Yatha raja tatha praja. He says, "Yatha praja tatha raja." Okay. I'm not going into that, but I know Milind bhai, you want to give a response to what Sunil bhai just.
No, I only want to say something.
I only want to also bring one additional perspective which he brought, because Yash Bhatt, I must thank you for raising question even before this webinar started, and I really, that shows the interest that the individual has, and he only talks about the aspiration being met using power and influence, and power and influence has certain things to do with freedom and liberty, as Sunil bhai just now talked about He was, of course, a tongue-in-cheek remark when he said, you two are more popular or whatever. But the point is that power and influence also matters in terms of enjoying that freedom and liberty that we all have. So it's a matter of perception. Milind bhai, how would you respond?
So let me first start with a motherhood statement which Sunil bhai made, that no one can challenge that report. And I don't agree with that, right? First. So Freedom House or whatever may be the case. My country, I will challenge on the basis of what I experience. And I will not accept that motherhood statement. That's the first thing. Second thing which I would want to mention. Why? Freedom House is an organization. It's an organization which is an NGO. They have come up with a report. Does not mean that that is gospel truth. Right? And let me tell you 3 points on which I have lost marks in the country. And we have not lost something significant. We were 71, we have gone to 67 marks. 4 marks we have lost. And I have studied that. And I'm sure that I would have studied that. What? First, they say that the Muslims don't get the equal opportunity in this country. That's one ground. First is that they start with such a strong biased view. He says Hindu nationalist party is ruling this country. Is it right? Do I agree that it's a Hindu nationalist party which is ruling this country? It's a democratically. It is challenging the entire 130 crores of people. It's not a Hindu nationalist party. It's a secular party which has, by its constitution, it has got that. It may have its ideas which are there, which are pro something. I think it starts with a negative view, and that's the reason why I reject this. I reject this report. What do they say? They say that Muslims do not have political rights and their political rights are affected because of CA. Have they studied CA? And they are saying that I've lost 2 marks because of that. What do they say? Anglo-Indians are not getting, their Rajya Sabha seat has been taken away. And that's the reason why I lose marks. After 60 years of independence, I still have to give Anglo-Indians 2 seats in Rajya Sabha. Why? And I lose marks for that. That my democracy is getting affected. I think it comes with a loaded aspect. And I personally feel, and that's what I feel, people don't like aspirational India. It is a challenge to the power. India has not succumbed to US, has not succumbed to China, it is not succumbing to Russia. It is becoming a power on its own. And that's the reason why there is all the more reason why. So that's what I would say. Now let me come to Yash's question, right?
Yeah.
So let me come to Yash. Very quickly, I think the absolutely right observation by Yash. Very apt. What has happened? Because of various things, we are giving, see, there are 3 things where we never invested in the past. We always invested in degrees and we never invested in the skills. We never created pride in the skill, but we always created pride in a degree. That was the reason why what happened, that we never recognized talent. We never recognized talent. In this huge period that we had, where we were under the license Raj, the technology was always given a significant back foot. The pride for a good technology was never there. I was running a Fiat, and Fiat would run for 30 years without any change because there was no one else who was allowed to enter. Where is the question of recognizing technology? Where is the question of if I had connects, then I would get a license? So we moved only from British Raj to license Raj. Where is the question of an entrepreneur? It was Birlas and Tatas and those persons who had say in the government would set up. So that's the reason why India by culture has not developed respecting technology. And that has to change. And that's where the startup India, that's where the make in India, which is
but Milind bhai, still Yash observation is about the whole game of this power and influence that people from various families they have that along with them vis-a-vis as you said, startup India and other things where there are a lot of unknown corners, people are emerging as an entrepreneur. So that's probably
what's Baiju? What is Baiju?
Exactly.
Baiju Ravindran is an ordinary middle class person, right? Absolutely. And he has created world's largest tech company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, you give good examples.
You can't forget, right?
Yeah. Since both of you are on this topic, I'm just taking Chirag Baksh's question, which is
not me yet. Not both of us. Okay. Only one yes so far, right?
Yeah, Sunil bhai. Yeah. I'm just adding that because probably your question would also, or your answer would also address that part. And he said, what should be India's role in new leadership map of the world? Which is in a way your rebuttal to Milind Mehta that India is emerging as a power of on its own. Probably that would get covered. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I can say in one caption, there is already a mission clarion call statement, Vishwaguru, right? So we are on the way to become Vishwaguru. But see, that's a more rather larger abstract question, which can be answered separately. As far as Yash question is concerned, that how does one young person in India feel that environment and the ecosystem that prevails in the country will make him feel confident, will make him have of course, he has to ride on the grit. Any entrepreneur has to ride on the grit, first of all, but enough gumption and enabling ecosystem that will make him feel confident that his aspirations can be realized. Now, as far as, the ecosystem is concerned, we have some structural problems in the sense that, the bureaucratic setup, certain mindset of the people in the power be, the interferences of the politicians at the state government level, especially now at the central government level, the interference is much less than what it used to be. There is a great use of digital platform and technology in various interface with the government agencies. I think in that area, there is definitely a great deal of improvement, and anybody can agree on that. And I'm sure Milind, my learned friend, will also agree that
your convergence is necessary. I mean, there has to be convergence of at least one or two thoughts. Twitter and Facebook are the latest medium to express my views.
Now, that affirmation from Milind and you will make me feel less goozy and nervy, which I am already feeling. And it's palpable.
I'm independent. I'm neither on either side.
No, you are both of you are independent, but you see, you guys are so awesome in your presentations. So that gooziness and nerviness is palpable on my face. So if I get an affirmation of one, I'm saying it right away.
Yeah,
but so be that as it may. So my, of course, response to yes, raise a very valid question. So the whole set of variables, the less interference of bureaucracy, less scope for nepotism and pulling the strings and all. To some extent, at central level, let me tell you, Yash, that has started happening. I will not blame, and that has started happening ever since the delicensing was set in 91, and then thereafter successive governments, UPAs as well as NDA 1 and now NDA 2 has also worked on that. And digital platform is being used extensively. I think we have to give full marks to all the successive governments on that. The other aspects like bureaucracy, that bureaucracy is also coming down. And in fact, one of the reasons why, this government has taken a very bold step, one is that IBC, that is, insolvency bankruptcy code, the ease of, exiting and, remaining in business, as well as, the faceless assessment of income. I'm sure, Milind, this must be music to your ears when I'm saying that, I'm giving full marks and full compliments to the government. So that aspect also, yes, you should bear in mind. So for new generation entrepreneurs, those startups and all, a lot of facilities have been created. And, you guys are technology oriented, technology enabled, and all the major interfaces with the government is already digital. The other social aspects, and state government, land procurement, electricity connection, they do remain a problem and all those things. But I think we are getting out of it and overcoming it. And therefore, secondly, on the labor front, there is one more reform has come in this pandemic period. I'm sure Samir is an expert on that. The facility to hire people on a contract basis, on a tenure basis, is also one of the features which I personally feel should be helping the businessman in selecting the right people. Yeah, that's what.
On just last aspect of freedom, because we were on the topic of freedom and there were power and influence part of Yash Bhatt's question also came into being. Just last part, how is your view on the social media driven perception about the country rather than the genuine perception? Maybe social media perception and genuine perception could match. I'm not saying that they are not matching. They may be exactly in convergence. But I'm saying the over reliance on social media based perception, that's what probably Milind Bhai was driving the case.
Okay, let me tell you.
Or against the Freedom Report, but I'm just asking the social media. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Freedom Report, we have sidestep. That's fine, very rightly also. But let me tell you, you know my
sidestep. You conveniently put that word. Yeah, go ahead, Sunil. Sorry. Yeah.
No. See, on social media, Samir, you are also one very active member in one of the groups that we run, Esoteric. You remember? You see that right now we are firmly into the era of post-truth.
Yeah,
let's accept the fact.
I will agree.
In as much as the communication proliferation, the social media as the propeller, and the great deal of convenience and facility given to people to express themselves, full marks to this communication revolution. But what has happened is the fallout of this, unfortunate fallout of this, is that people tend to rely on ready-made information, which keeps on circulating, and sometimes in great deal of megaphone echo chambers, which is either sometimes disinformation or misinformation, and very few times well-reasoned, well-formed opinion-based comments. Now, this is something, in fact, you remember this, my favorite term. Every piece of information that you receive on social media, please don't believe it
Absolutely
as it is, unless, of course, the source is somebody like Samir Parikh or Milind. When he said something, I readily believe. I don't have to verify. But my point is that you must have your own filter receptor. This is very important. And filters and be an informed opinion holder, rather than somebody has sent it. And if somebody has sent it, and everybody has a cognitive bias. I have a cognitive bias, you have a cognitive bias, and all those things. That's how the human brains have been wired. But what importantly, social media. This is my final parting line on social media is that unfortunately, in this post-truth phenomenon, this cognitive bias is turning into a cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a very, very sad state of affairs for a society, and therefore politicians will misuse it, and they will keep on taking people up the garden path.
Yeah.
And so
I think the fair way of looking at social media, social media is influencing perception about country's democracy, because I was talking at that level, and not really at the way individuals should treat social media information, which is of course an important data point. It's very critical for us to look at which are the forces which have what interest when they are perceiving certain things. For example, let's say and that's where we move to the next subject. And the recent happening that took place at Mumbai, just yesterday's incident, right, where the police commissioner wrote a letter to the chief minister of Maharashtra, and where he has made certain allegations. Now, that whole aspect of corruption also plagues our society, and to that extent, all forms of dissonance that you described could have its role to play. Taking that further, because while we all talk about patriotism and nationalism, and before I come to that, just one thing I want to respond to all the audience, because there are some people in the audience who have raised their hands. Probably they want to express their views but I'm not in a position to allow that, because we have to stop it at 12:30, and we would not be doing a good justice if we don't really give time to panelists. So
I think time to take questions now.
Can I quickly mention about a letter by the police commissioner to the home minister? Only couple of sentences.
No,
the fact that the home minister has given the fact that the home minister has given a budget did not surprise me. The only thing which surprised me that the ex-police commissioner wrote.
And you are saying that that's the power of liberty, is it?
No, I am not saying he wrote. I think otherwise it is universal. And if you ask almost all chief ministers and home ministers would confirm that it is same in all states, irrespective of the rule.
We are not discussing that particular incident, Milind. I'm just taking that as an example to bring the whole aspect of social progress. Okay. And cultural social relations along with the whole aspect of nationalism and patriotism. We'll be drawing foreign relations dimension.
Samir, can I suggest?
Yeah.
Of course, the intensity with which and the richness of the contents that is coming out, in this discussion may elongate the time. I think we are already at 12:15.
Yeah.
So if I mean, subject to your consent.
No, it is for me. It's convenient. I was just looking at the time. And...
So I was just saying that maybe we can take foreign relations as just one aspect, and in which both Milind and I, and thereafter let's take the questions, because then the audience will feel more involved and engaged, and so we can take up, because a lot of things will come in the questions also.
Correct.
From the audience and people. So just foreign relations, if that is subject to your consent and consent.
So I am dropping the social aspect, the cultural aspect, because to some extent we have touched the corruption aspect and other things. But although nationalism you have touched, I have just one question to both of you. And the question is there a difference between patriotism and nationalism? If so, is such a distinction necessary? And if not, do the overlaps cause more confusion than commitment for India?
I think Milind, as usual, can take the first call.
It is up to
I think
whoever wants. Sunil bhai, you can take.
I think you go ahead. Go ahead, Sunil bhai.
No, please take the call.
Sorry, can you repeat?
I just said I was talking about nationalism and patriotism, and I said there is one question common to both of you. Is there any difference between patriotism and nationalism? These days there is a lot of differentiation being done in media. If so, is such a distinction necessary, Milind bhai? And if not, do the overlaps cause more confusion rather than commitment for India? This is my
so I would put it like this, that the nationalism has been used in a negative sense when people start telling something, and honestly speaking, it is a little more aggressive way of saying patriotism, right? Patriotism is I love my country, whereas nationalism that I love my country more than your country. I think if you put it on simple, or it could be also I love my country more than you love, right? That's what is the way in which it happens. And I personally feel this whole debate is completely misdirected. The reason is that what has happened, the concept of nationalism was coined, and I would very honestly see that this government felt that there is a need to create a national pride. And there is a need that the country should get, honestly speaking, united in respect of some matters. You can't unite them for religion. You can't unite them in respect of a method of living. You can't unite them on account of the anything, culture, anything. So what is it that you would do it, right? Can you do it in Vande Mataram? Can you do it in a national song? Can you do it in possibly a national anthem? Can you at least expect people that when they go to the theater, they will get up? It's something where people identify commonly to the nation. I think that is what. And then when it started, it just to discredit a very strong attempt, like moving. And someone has asked that, how do we differ from Japan? Right? A Japanese is extremely connected to their nation. They are extremely connected to this. Even their cleanliness is attached to their pride for the nation and the land on which they live, right? I think we have lost that over a period of time, and that is creation. And I think there is a very strong attempt which is made by this government that bring people, I can't bring them on anything else. So let me bring them on a national flag. Let me bring them on something together, right? Including possibly banging during the pandemic time, you thali vagadwa. These were the things where you bring people on same platform, right? Even that is being ridiculed, and that is being said that it is nationalism, which is not, that's not patriotism. I personally feel that these are wrong ways, and I think that is coming in the way in bringing people together. People take pride in saying that why should I get up in the theater? Why should I show my nationalism? No, there is no need. It's the country needs. When the football match is played, all footballers do play the national anthem. Why? They want them to bring together their minds. Why do I go to the school and do a prayer? Because I want people to be brought under the same thought process, at least on something which is not necessarily mine or my religion or something.
Very well said. Sunil bhai, how would you respond? Rajiv Jain has also written, I do not think that distinction is necessary between patriotism and nationalism. However, this has been the new normal, if I may say, in last few years, that those kind of distinction is being made. So yeah, please.
See, Milind has nuanced the current interpretation of nationalism, or the manifest of that in the forms of certain gestures and certain slogans. But let me begin with what is nationalism. Nationalism is a word originally derived from natio. That's a Latin word, and that originated some 400-500 years back, when in the Europe, the group of people in the societies or units and all, when they were asked by their cultural affinity or by their physical proximity to identify common goals for a greater common good, that's how the word natio started, and from that the spirit of nationalism. Now, over the years, it remained in a more subliminal form until such time, if you look at the history of last 100-150 years, whenever the economic miseries or whenever the economic turmoils increase in the society, like what happened after First World War or in the first 4 decades of the last century, and between First World War and Second World War, it became a good vehicle and a perverted version of nationalism to seek populism. I think one thing which is not dealt with by Milind is that populism is something which is riding on this nuanced new version of nationalism which is being ushered in our country. Now, going back to what is nationalism at its more holistic level, these populism or populist leaders used the nationalism and stoking the identity with respect to their race, with respect to their religion, with respect to their situation, gave it gelled with the people. It gelled with the people, and emotion. It became a great emotion career to seek the political entity and legitimacy. Now, today, for the last 7-8 years, what is happening is the same nationalism spirit is, very adroitly, very smartly being stoked up, and, subliminally, I may say, or, subtly, and at times, blatantly, to convey the feeling, the traditions, the customs and beliefs of majoritarian population. Now, this is what is this perversion is happening, and that is likely to subvert, the real spirit of nationalism. Now, talking about, Vande Mataram or, probably Bharat Mata Ki, so the point at issue is that I don't have to wear my patriotism, which is a subset of nationalism, up my sleeve. It can be much more subtle. It can be much more imbued and imbibed, rather than wearing a lapel of patriotic feelings on my collar of the shirt or on my blazer. I would rather make it more holistic, more involved. I get the same kind of pleasure and thrill, irrespective of the fact whether Mohammad Sami takes a wicket to help India gain victory in a cricket match, or it is Ishant Sharma. I get equal pleasure. And my sense of nationalism, my patriotism, whenever India gets or comes out with flying colors, every Indian citizen rightfully feels pride in. And that is what is to be celebrated, rather than some narrow-minded a manifesto of something. That's how I would look at it.
I think very forceful, very strong point, Sunil bhai, you made.
Let me mention.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. Because we have to
only
go
30
relations.
seconds. Only 30
full
seconds.
of questions. Yeah.
Only 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I think there is a very concentrated move that anything which is done to unite the nation is being attached to a religion. And that is how any attempt which is made, you do any attempt for that matter, that attempt is being ridiculed or tainted by saying that it is a majoritarian view. I think that is what I understand is the way, and this is what I call it, and not Sunil Bhai. This is not Sunil Bhai which is telling it, but I call it intellectual dishonesty.
Correct.
And I'm using a very strong word, and not for Sunil Bhai. It is an intellectual dishonesty where any move, I say, for example, I have come up with Vande Mataram. You don't like it. Come up with your own slogan and say that I will unite the country on this basis. Come up. I think we need it. I think in this country, we need something which is common for everyone. You say that on Monday, I'll wear white shirt. I'm okay. All people would wear okay. But come up. Don't ridicule and don't allow any person to bring people together. I think every attempt which is made, it is being tainted, and that is very dangerous for this country.
Yeah,
and
this is very emotional topic. So I will have to stop it here and move on to Sunil bhai. We will have to move on. This is very emotional topic.
Only one line. I must thank Milind for being very charitable. Elsewhere, people like me are labeled as urban Naxalites. So thank you very much for that.
No.
And secondly, being ridiculed or being questioned about your certain caption lines, which clearly connote which kind of religion you are promoting, is less harmful and less desirable than being persecuted, vilified, and even demonized. I think this is what
Wait.
I'm okay with Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan.
Milind, we will have to move ahead. We'll have to move ahead. And I'm just skipping. Otherwise, we can continue this up to 4 o'clock also. So,
no. Please,
and there are some very interesting questions which has come, and I want to also justify that. This is the last part on the foreign relations that Sunil bhai you said. Although I will provide some context that, but I'm not talking from that. The question is only how.
Can I interrupt here? Sorry. I think we are overshooting the time, and I am also primary culprit for that. I must admit, because the sway and the swing of the points made. So if you think appropriate, foreign relations itself is a separate topic.
Yeah.
Instead of if Milind wants to have some point, he can. Instead of my saying anything on foreign, you just say a few things if you want to, and then let's put it up to the
I'm okay.
I mean, this is my request.
I already see the number going down, number of participants going down. So honestly speaking, what I understand is I think we should respect the time. We will keep another debate, no problems.
Yes.
Yeah,
so just few questions. I'm just taking 2-3, although I have already covered quite a few during the discussion. But 2-3, TNC said our merchandise exports were US. Now this is interesting, Milind bhai, and you need to respond to this. Although this is to both of you, but Milind bhai, you can respond. $330 billion in 2013-14. We haven't got there in any of the subsequent years. To some extent, not all, you can attribute to that to commodity prices, but we seem to have become less competitive vis-a-vis many other countries. Perhaps that explains our more protectionism also. Your views.
So that's what I have been saying, that I think we had an apathy. See, in this elongated period till 1991, there was a strong apathy of investing in technology, investing in capacity, and that has gone down deep into our culture of manufacturing. And whenever we were non-competitive, it was supported not by way of helping you improve the efficiency, but by way of supporting the inefficiency by subsidies. I think this is what was the culture. Now we need to move. And that is the reason why a country like China, which also did exactly the same, but it created humongous capacities. In fact, they supported capacity creation. They supported probably technology platforms to be created for the purpose of enabling that they are able to compete in respect of that. I think this would take some time for us to come back into the Make in India movement is a move towards ensuring that we move back from only service-focused growth to the product-focused growth. I think that is what is changing, and that is where we need to start working in respect of that. And this is where the real thing which is coming up. With China +1 policy, I think we will go great in respect of creating India as a manufacturing hub.
Thanks, Milind, where Madhu Mehta is, and Sunil bhai, you can address both the questions because Madhu Mehta has written a very interesting question. Are we not moving from farmer subsidy to subsidy-driven entrepreneurship? I am dismayed by the new breed of entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs because it is free money, more relatable with waiver of farmer loans. Creating wealth is taking backseat in minds of new gen entrepreneur. Considered that making money fast is the real goal, and aspirations have taken over from that perspective. So Sunil bhai, if while you are responding to the first one of TNC, Madhu Mehta,
I will take both the points which are very relevant. I completely agree with TNC's observation, which is fact-based and figures quoted. Since 2013-14, our exports have remained stagnant, something like $310 billion. So it's one more feather in the cap of last 8 years governance, like the stagnant figure of the overall employment situation. And these are facts, and this cannot be whisked away, and they cannot be dismissed. Yes, TNC's observation is also correct, and I subscribe to that. Probably somewhere down the line, the competitiveness of Indian entrepreneurs, save and except the service sector, certain service sector like software and all, has not been able to come up to the level that is expected, so that we become more export sustained economy. There have been last 30 years, feeling that we have a very mass home consumption and therefore there is no need for export. But that's not the correct picture. It's only partially correct. And the moment your imports go up, in case if the oil prices shoot up and all those, then again the balance of payment. So exports is nothing but to make your products more and more available in the world market, and therefore it will grow and something like that. Now, Make in India was a concept with a much fanfare and all those things. How much at the ground level it has realized the potential, I leave it to the business people and entrepreneurs who may be there to give their own call on that. I don't want to make a call on that. Of course, it has been substituted by Atmanirbhar and all those things. But let me also say in the passing, the recent development of 8 months back, on which there is no sufficient discussion, not even on a public platform, the withdrawal of India to be a part of RCEP, that is Regional Cooperation for Economic Partnership, is a huge implication in terms of future business by Indian businessmen and entrepreneurs that region. Of course, I don't want to delve into that and all these things. Yeah. Now, coming back to Madhu bhai's point, Madhu bhai, there is only there is one. No, Madhu bhai has asked a very moral or ethical question. That the farm subsidy we are lamenting, and we are whining about it and complaining about it because it is from the government exchequer. And why not the startups and all the big investments come and they get huge funding and crowdfunding and all. But Madhu bhai, there is one important distinction. In the startup financing or unicorn financing and all, or crowdfunding, it is the money of the high net worth individuals and private investors. I don't think government is hardly directly contributing anything, by way of funding. So to that extent, that moral question is getting addressed to my mind. That farm subsidy, of course, I am all for farm subsidy, and I mentioned in the beginning, if there is one class of people who have been affected the most and not got the fair terms of trade in last 40 years, it is the farmers. So that is what it is. On that note, I would like to hand it over to something like that. Thank you.
I'm moving from the various other questions pertaining to economy to a very one line, but very, very thought-provoking. Virendra Shah has written, can you elaborate the change in psyche of people and politicians? And the answer to some of the questions that we debated, although some of your views could also be into the root cause could be the way our politicians are thinking now. The role of opposition, quite a few of them have also talked about how do we consider the role of opposition in a democracy, because the thriving democracy needs thriving opposition, and which is right now there are challenges. So in terms of change in psychology of people as well as politicians, both the things, somewhere yatha praja tatha raja, that's I'm again coming back to that reverse phrase.
Yeah. So I think can I take that? Honestly speaking, yes, there is a need. So first, let me quickly talk about Madhubai's question. Possibly I did not. One. I think there is a need for having entrepreneurship, which is required to be kindled. I think if you do not make the risk money available to the entrepreneurs, I think you will never grow. And that's the reason why it is very essential that they must get funding, and because the one person takes the risk and he does not give a subsidy. He gives the money with an intention to earn significantly high money at a later date. So that's what is the way in which I would look at it, but that's very essential. The aspect about Yatha Praja, honestly speaking, there's a need, and these changes, in my view, is happening. I think people are becoming more conscious about where do they vote, what do they vote, what are they expecting. Unfortunate part.
Milind bhai, when you are talking about changes, Dinesh Kotecha has written a beautiful thing. Full doses of changes in all fields are made in wholesale basis rather than sequential basis. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
So what I understand is that whenever we are talking about this, see, opposition, yes, it is playing an extremely important role. But to have an irresponsible opposition is far worse than having a no opposition, because you could see that well-meaning. In fact, I must tell you something which is very important. We also have a similar system like House of Lords and House of Commons, which is there in UK. In India, we have got Rajya Sabha and this. In Rajya Sabha, in House of Lords, in case if there is any proposal by the lower house which goes to the upper house, and if that proposal is as per the mandate on which the government got elected, the House of Lords cannot send it back, or send it back only for a limited purpose. Now, that's what is the system and the principle that they follow. Here, even if you have elected a government, but you do not allow that government to function because they are doing as per what they had stated. People have elected them on those grounds, and if Rajya Sabha stalls those things, I think it is unfair, because Rajya Sabha is not the current view of the government. But that's what is the difference. Of course, I would also agree that House of Lords is not an elected body as compared to the Rajya Sabha, which is an indirectly elected body. But still, there is some say in respect of what is there as per the manifesto, etc. But I personally feel that the only thing which can happen is that all of us who are participating, English-speaking people that we call it, right? And it's what we call it, English-speaking is something which is said that we are the people who are very well educated, right? These are the persons who have got thoughts, those who mean well. Now, these people have to throw themselves into the fray of the politics. It is only then that the things would change. In fact, I had told the businessmen of Baroda something about last corporation elections. I said that you tell both the parties very clearly that we will give you funds only and only if you have all candidates which are of an X caliber, etc. Then we will have all corporators who are good. We will not give you any fund at all. Let the corporators decide. Let the businessmen, the money is going to come from them. So let them take a call that we will not fund you unless and until if you do not have a candidates, all are good candidates. I think that is what is required. But we all have personal interests, right? I would never say that, right? I have my personal interest. So I said, Maru kam pati jai chhe, pachi mare su problem. Right? I think if that situation is changed and everyone starts thinking on those lines, I'm sure that we are in for a great time.
Sunil bhai, any views that you want to share on this?
Is there a time left for
Ideally, we have
is there a
overshot.
time?
It's 12:40,
Yeah,
and
yeah, only
from a peak of 75 plus participants, right now we have 56. So
okay. Now, I would just say one line. There is one paradigm shift in the political scenario I've seen, having been observing and following Indian polity for the last 40 years. From the stance and public utterances, at least, of lots of dignity and all, in the last 10 years especially, the discourse which takes place and led by the most supreme leader of the country is so abrasive, and that is what is followed by a lot of other leaders of both the parties or all the parties, is something which is making us feel very ashamed. And that is the reason why we don't even switch on the TV channels or listen to the radios and other things, and we hardly read. So this is a very, very sad occurrence that has happened in last couple of years. And for that, the responsibility lies, and the accountability lies at the doorstep of the current crop of leaders. This is something which is and probably this is percolating downwards in the society at all levels, whether on the roads or in your office or in the municipal corporation. The kind of response, the kind of greetings which you get is nothing short of being abrasive. And we are becoming, more and more abrasive collectively as a society. So that's the unfortunate fallout of that. Anyway, I think we have taken enough time. So now we are closing remarks.
Right. So once again, many thanks, Sunil Bhai and Milind Bhai, and many thanks to everyone who is there in the audience. I think there was a fantastic participation from the audience, and if you get a time, please go through. A lot of comments are there in the chat. Also complimenting both of you for setting a very good tone of this very live debate. And some questions, I know there are quite a few participants who raised their hands because they wanted to actually participate and share their views. But because of the format and the time lag and being fair to the overall structure, I could not really allow that. But yes,
thank you.
I could see that at least in conversation series, a full practice of liberty and freedom today without any protectionism, and a very no, both, I think both of you, Sunil Bhai and Milind Bhai, you shared your views without really or being politically correct or being diplomatic. I think that's the way In Conversation series is designed, and I think you both lived up to those expectations. Sunil Bhai, when you started with the whole equivalent, what was the phrase you used? I forgot that.
Equinox.
Sorry?
Yeah. Equinox,
right. So you started with equinox, and I thought that whether this equilibrium that I want to maintain throughout this, 1 hour 30 minutes that was originally planned, we are almost 1 hour 45 minutes. Would I be able to maintain or not? I'm not sure whether I could do that justice or not.
No,
but
you have.
I think I made all out effort. Yeah,
so you first started with taking a wonderful job of moderating between two persons who are known to be sworn very diametrically opposite on this topic, and you decided to be a moderator. That itself was very courageous, and you did it fantastic.
No, thank you. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. But I'm just trying to, I think some very important phrases emerge. If when we go through this recording, if we can simply download those 10, 12 key phrases that emerge, the perspective that was brought from on all the areas except foreign relations, and foreign relations also to a great extent we did touch when we talked about India becoming a power on its own. And I think the confidence and the way political dispensation has moved. So I'm not.
It's already on a way to become Vishwaguru.
Now all three of us will have to neutralize and come back to our normal
this is nothing but a manifest of coming out of the spell of nervousness. When the program is coming, I'm coming out of my nervousness. So this is a
thank you very
medication.
much. I'm not taking time of everyone. It's Sunday lunchtime.
Thank
to
you.
summarize every single aspect that was covered, except one thing I would say, that the beauty of India lies in its plurality, its diversity.
Yes.
And I think both these gentlemen, Sunil Bhai and Milind Bhai, a symbol of true patriot, a symbol of true freedom, a symbol of true entrepreneurship, a symbol of true intelligence, have given us a very good thought around how do we view diversity or pluralism from multiple perspectives. I think it is the same thing which we are observing from multiple perspectives. The best part is that this is a country where we are still able to see all these perspectives, all these dimensions from the multiple perspective, and that is generating a lot of food for thought for all of us. I think coming days and years going to be very exciting time for India. And when someone like this who would carry the torch for Baroda Book Browser or In Conversation series would have a panel discussion on India at 100. And I think that discussion would have some very, very interesting and very, very positive, very, very optimistic perspective.
I don't know about that, but your son will be the moderator.
All of us, our kids are doing great. And thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Shambhavi, once again. Thank you very much, everyone who is there on this. There are still 45 people and they have not left. Generally, in vote of thanks, everybody leaves. So thank you, all those participants. You really made our day. Thank you.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
This recording will be placed on YouTube after necessary cleaning, and once Sunil Bhai approves, so you'll be able to see that. And the chat will be downloaded and forwarded to both of you, Sunil Bhai and Milind Bhai. So in 101, if you want to respond to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and have a nice remainder of Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you.